Okay, this one should be a little shorter. This video should be a little shorter than the one I just did on pronouns. This one I'm going to combine two subjects. They're a little smaller, whereas pronouns there are so many of them. So this one is on prepositions and verbs. That is verb systems. So I'm going to do prepositions first. Prepositions are kind of simple, but sometimes that maybe can be confusing. So I'm going to talk about what they are and then kind of talk about some of the mistakes I often see students make. Prepositions, the name actually means prepono. It comes from prepono, which means to put before. So a preposition is really an adverb, or it's a subcategory of an adverb that tells us where or when something is. So I'm going to use, I'm supposed to use black markers, you guys tell me. I'm going to use one before. Before. Okay? So, for example, I stood before the bench. You know, if you're a lawyer or something like that. Where did you stand? You stood before. But you could say, before I went to the store, and that would also, we'd see it as an adverb in English, but anyway, the prepositions tell us where or when something is. Before I went to the store, I put on my shoes, which is a good idea, because I think they'll kick you out. Okay. So prepositions, the name literally means placed before. Okay. Now, in Latin, as you learn prepositions, what you'll see actually in the book itself is something in parentheses usually. Most dictionaries put it in parentheses. So I'm going to take one of the first prepositions anyone knows, because this is going to give me my example that students mess up on a lot as well. And if you looked up the preposition ud, what you'd see in parentheses next to it would be plus ACC. That's not the basketball conference, ACC. It's the accusative case. What this means is that in order for this preposition to work, I like to think of it as like chemistry. So in order for this to form correctly and not explode, that would be a bad thing, it must take its object in the accusative case. That's what this tells me. This preposition goes before its object in the accusative case. Okay? Goes before its object. So whatever the object is, you'll see special verbs plus genitive, or prepositions plus dative, or prepositions plus accusative, or prepositions plus ablative. And in some cases, prepositions plus both. And that's going to give me my second bit I'm going to talk about. You'll notice that the preposition in, if you look it up in your dictionary or in the back of your Latin book, you'll see it takes either plus accusative or plus ablative. And that's really tricky for students. So I'm going to get into that in a second. Okay, first, plus the accusative with ud. Ud plus the accusative, and a general rule for the accusative is that prepositions that mean going towards something take the accusative. Okay, and there's a reason for this, but it doesn't really matter for us today. Okay, so they take movement towards. So for example, the sailor sailed to the sea. That would be the sailor sailed ad mare. Okay, and that's a third declension neuter. But I did put it in the accusative, even though it looks like it could be the nominative as well. Okay? So for this to be correct, this prepositional phrase to be correct, mare must be in the accusative because ud demands its object in the accusative. Let's take another one. He flew at his friend. So we'll grab that good old Latin word amico. And I have to put amicus into the accusative. It could be plural, it could be singular, it doesn't matter. He flew at his friends, ad amicos. It could be that way as well, but it must be in the accusative for this to be correct. Okay, hopefully that makes enough sense. Now, common mistakes. I'm going to do two of these real quick. Oftentimes people try to have their cake and eat it too with ud. Ud can be used for the indirect object. For example, I spoke to my friend. Ad amico. You can do that. You can have ud work in that sense. But you can't do this. So let's say I spoke amico. I could do that as well. I spoke to my friend. Here it's a dative. To my friend. So I could say I spoke ad amicum, or I could do I spoke laquor ad amicum or laquor amico. I could do it either way. But I often see students do this. They try to have their cake and eat it too. They say something like ad amico. Ad amico. I misspelled it, but you get the idea. Ad amico. Here they've got a problem. Remember, these are like chemical formulae. It must take an accusative. It cannot take its object in the dative. So here, this is something I see my students do all the time. They take it in the dative, which would be a pure direct object, or pardon me, pure indirect object, but they combine it with ud. They want to say ud in the dative. You can't do that. You could either do ud with the accusative or just the dative, to my friend. Okay? The second very, very common mistake I see made involves the preposition in, which in English means in. But it means it in two ways. It either means it in as in going into, so here's my house, here's why I'm not an art teacher. It can mean it plus the accusative as I'm going into my house. So we'll do here, I'll write my sentence, in casum. Intrat in casum. He is going into the house. But it can also mean in as in where one is. I am in the house. That would be in plus the ablative. In casa. In casa. I am in the house. Adsum in casa. Or sto in casa. Or sereo in casa. Whatever it is. Okay, so one is place where. That's the ablative. The other is movement towards or into. And this sometimes could be translated on as well. Like if you're sitting on the roof, you could also say in casa. Okay? So that's a very common mistake. In plus the accusative, movement to or towards. In plus the ablative, place where. Let's see here, where am I at time-wise? Okay, good. Okay, so that's kind of all I was going to say on prepositions. Note what case they take their object in, and then in, be careful, whether it's accusative or ablative, movement towards accusative, place where ablative, or the preposition ud. It always takes the accusative. So don't try to do ud plus the dative. That's no good. Okay. So that's it for prepositions. They're kind of basic, and most grammars do a really good job.